Oh, today is the day of Valentine's, celebrating love of every kind. Text your crush, your lovers, your friends, tell them that you're thinking of them. But on this day of love and care, there's one thing that you shouldn't dare to do. Don't transfer Bitcoin into the account of any guy who you only know online. It doesn't matter that he seems really, really super duper kind. Stop. Don't do it. That's a scam.
All right, and welcome back, everybody. We are here with Lisa Plaggemier, Executive Director of the National Cybersecurity Alliance. Lisa has been really raising a lot of flags around the seriousness of romance scams. So for people who have been following us for a while, you've heard from Aaron West about pig butchering scams. Let's go a little bit higher level and a little bit broader and talk about romance scams in general. And Lisa, I know that NCA has had an effort around bringing education for romance scams. So what is the top level story that you give to the general public about, what a romance scam is and what to look out for?
Yeah, actually, every year we do a campaign around this time of the year. We usually kick it off at the end of January or beginning of February, and we don't just talk about romance scams because that is timely, but we also talk about safe use of dating apps because oftentimes one can lead to the other. You might meet somebody on a dating app and they do some things that should be red flags, like immediately want to take the conversations off of the dating app and move to an encrypted app, for example. So we do a whole campaign kit so that people have some cute little social media graphics. So you'll see our campaign, and then you might see other organizations using our materials too. But yeah, there are definitely some red flags that the relationship moving very quickly. More quickly than it seems like would be normal. This magically feels like your soulmate very quickly. They seem to relate to you on a bunch of different levels. I think the thing that really gets me in the gut about these particular scams is that they're preying on a common human weakness we have, that we all have a need for human connection. And sometimes when we go through difficult periods in our lives, they're looking for people that have maybe just had a battle with a serious illness or lost a loved one, or we often find that people who have a tendency to maybe overshare on social media about some of those things, you're really kind of painting a target on yourself. And it's a shame because you're at a time when you're that's your way these days, potentially of reaching out to people to get support from your friends, is doing a post about what you're going through. Mm-hmm. So that just brings us back around to our advice of making things like your friends list private on Facebook. And you can still use social media, but it really, goes all the way back to the safe use of social media. People don't realize the different things that they're putting out there and how that data is being aggregated. That information is being collected in a way, what's publicly available and then what's available on the dark web, to know so much about you that they can seem like your soulmate really quickly.
Yeah, I can imagine. A couple years ago, I heard horror stories about people who would scan the internet for obituaries. And then basically see where there's a widow or a widower left and put it on their calendar to 6 months later reach out to that person and see what they could do. Is that kind of stuff really happening, or is it more just crimes of convenience and finding people that have their profiles open on Facebook and then just doing a DM based on what they're seeing in the profile?
I think it's really happening. I've heard of that a couple of times from folks in federal law enforcement. You have to remember that usually a romance scam is a long con. So the payoff is bigger than, some other kind of scam with a lower payoff that might be quicker for them to perpetrate. So they're in other words, sadly, it's worth the investment of their time. They're going to do a little research. They're going to look at obituaries. They're going to look at other information about you. They're going to do that research on the dark web and then put that together with what they can find publicly available, figure out where you might be vulnerable, figure out what are the emotional threads that they can pull on? What are, how can they tug on your heartstrings? What story can they tell you that might resonate with you because of something you went through years ago that they just happened to find an old post on? So it's really worth it for them. I'm also hearing from federal law enforcement that they're building really intricate backstories. So there was a point where you would say to a potential victim, just make sure you independently verify everything that they're telling you. In other words, what they do for a living, who their family members are, all those things. And you could go do a quick Google and, you might not find anything, or you do a reverse image search and you realize that that's a stock photo. Well, these days now with AI generating the photos, they've realized that they need to build intricate backstories. So they've created a whole character and a whole life and a family and Facebook pictures and, a LinkedIn profile and all these things, maybe a fake website for the company that they work at or something, whatever they need to substantiate the story that they're telling you. And so you can't even really independently verify anymore by the kinds of things we would all do, like Googling somebody's name, our own little version of OSINT.
Mm-hmm.
It's not enough anymore. So it really gets down to, those other telltale signs and the big obvious sign, they've asked me for money.
Right.
Or something that can be converted into money.
What are some of the most common vectors for that first contact? Like you mentioned dating apps as one of them, but I also recently learned that sometimes those texts you get where it seems like it was sent to the wrong person is actually someone trying to begin you down this path. What are some of those vectors that you would, the very first time that you get contacted by this person, what does that look like? The
random texts are absolutely a thing. I mean, you've talked to Aaron West, so you've heard about pig butchering and how random those things are. And that's the start of a relationship scam or a romance scam, right? They're just trying to get you to respond. So the best practice there is just to report and delete. Social media, Facebook in particular, it's really important to have your profile be as locked down as it possibly can be, your friends list private, things like that. Don't respond to any DMs on Facebook. If we have our whole life history on there and everybody can see it, or they can piece it together through various other websites, then you could, one of the frequent scenarios I hear about is somebody reaching out saying, oh, don't you remember it's me from elementary school or middle school or your high school sweetheart or something. And maybe you've just been widowed or you're a widow or widower.
But it is primarily unsolicited direct messages, not so much like groups that are sort of honeypots or things like that. It's mostly unsolicited DMs.
So one of the frequent vectors I hear about that's very, very hard for a lot of victims to recognize is most of us, unfortunately, I don't think enough of us have MFA enabled on their Facebook account. And so that can lead to account takeovers. This has happened to people like my aunt. Somebody, she's probably using a recycled password or one that's way too short. So somebody's hacked her Facebook account. Then I'm getting DMs from her, but they're not really my Aunt Betty. They're just somebody pretending to be my Aunt Betty. So that happens a lot, I think, in friendship scams, romance scams can lead to pig butchering, crypto scams, where you've had a friend or an acquaintance whose Facebook account has been taken over. I've even heard stories where that person has reported it to Facebook. Facebook doesn't give them control of the account back because if you think about it, you didn't have to give Facebook your driver's license or your passport to open a Facebook account. So they really don't have any way of proving that that's you, that you're the one really asking for your account back. And so oftentimes they'll just kind of leave it dangling out there. The real owner of the account doesn't have control of it. Somebody else has control of it. And then they're using that to scam other people. There was a case in the news just recently, not romance scam related, I think it was crypto scam related, but it was Canadian law enforcement. So somebody from the Canadian law enforcement, or maybe they were retired, lost control of their Facebook account. That account was then used to contact other retirees from Canadian law enforcement, and a few of them lost their life savings because they were convinced that they were being taught by their friend how to invest in crypto. So account takeovers leading to really bad things is a big problem. And I really wish that Facebook would mandate MFA.
Yeah. And you mentioned other social media profiles. So it's going to do a background check on somebody who just contacted you, and it's easy now to fabricate things. I think it's also important to point out that just because a social media account hasn't been created 2 days ago doesn't mean that it's a good social media account. It could be account takeover, or it could have been a sock puppet account that was created 10 years ago and somebody's been cultivating it, but they just changed the name on it.
Yeah, they're aging those accounts now.
Yeah. Building connections and everything else.
Yeah, I saw somebody post on LinkedIn a couple of months ago, a list, some retired general who I don't even think had a Facebook account, and he found 20 fake profiles pretending to be that retired general from the U.S. military.
Gosh, the legitimate account takeovers is something I haven't thought about. I haven't been using Facebook very much lately. I do have MFA enabled. Don't try me. But I have seen friends get their accounts hacked. But I didn't think about that for this kind of attack. That's devastating. That's a trusted network being invaded.
I don't think I've met anybody that hasn't said, yeah, I've gotten a DM from a friend of mine who had their account taken over. Like it's happened so frequently. And I think Facebook only requires, what is it, a 6 or 8 digit or character password?
I think it's like 8.
Which is incredibly short. I mean, that takes seconds to crack.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, and I mean, that's the thing with Meta in general. They've got so many problems like that if they really wanted to fix, they could fix in an instant. But for whatever reason, they're not incented to yet.
That is correct. I did some checking. If Google is to be believed, if the site that I landed on, their biggest advertiser, because we've thought about like where's the leverage with Meta, their largest advertiser is Temu, which is tied to the CCP.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's something Mason and I have been like tracking over the past several weeks, especially since the TikTok ban was coming to, a 12-hour ban was coming to a head. China is really bringing its A game on information warfare and all the pressure campaigns that it can bring to us economically, socially, politically, and so on. Because we have seen, TikTok, and we saw people willingly fleeing over to Red Note.
Yep.
And then we saw within weeks of that a whole bunch of consternation because of the release of DeepSeek, which had concerns, and people are trying to figure out how to deal with that. But that caused some economic hardship internally here in the U.S. and people questioning our leadership in different areas of the tech industry. And now we've got, on top of all of that, a named trade war with them, and people trying to figure out how to react to that. When it comes to romance scams and when it comes to the things that worry you, I guess, as executive director of the NCA, maybe it's broader than just romance scams, but where does China fit into that picture?
Well, if you believe Aaron West and some of what was written, this was hinted at in the House Select Committee on the CCP report on fentanyl. There is a gangster known as Broken Tooth who's involved in the fentanyl trade. And he's also the guy running pig butchering, basically running the scam centers, the human traffic, where human trafficking victims have been trafficked into these scam centers, and romance scams is in their toolbox, right? That's romance scams are potentially a part of a bit larger pig butchering scam, as are friendship scams, crypto scams, like whatever it is. It's all kind of all the good things rolled into one. Yeah. And so he, I think, sits on a committee on the CCP. Like he's tied to the government. And so I have asked some folks on the Hill, boy, it would be great if we could get this in writing. If we could tie the scams, romance scams, friendship scams, pig butchering, all these things back to the CCP as part of their strategy to weaken the United States. And we had more solid numbers on the losses. Aaron's estimate is quite high, larger than what you see reported anyplace else. I think somewhere around the neighborhood of $40 to $50 billion a year. Then I think you might have some more people taking notice. We always, years ago in cybersecurity, gosh, I hope we don't say this anymore, but we used to talk about people as the weakest link. I think that China has found people as the weakest link. I'm not going to walk away with millions of dollars, no matter how many people I have hacking away at our financial services industry, for example. But we can hack grandma, or we can hack a romance scam victim for a couple $1,000 or a couple $100,000. And eventually that really starts to add up. And I will quote Aaron West, it is the wholesale movement of wealth from the United States to the CCP. So I do hope that if you're a researcher out there and you're listening and you're looking for something to do and you want to tie romance scams and pig butchering and all those things back to Broken Tooth and on to the CCP, there is some information out there, but I don't think there's been enough explicit research that makes that really, really clear, that connection really clear. So that's why I think it's even more important that people take these things seriously, because you're not just up against some local criminal who's a solo operator. You're up against potentially a nation state and highly, highly, very well organized crime, very sophisticated with psychological manipulation and all the technology and tools at their disposal, AI, So it's really something. One of the things that we've thought about doing lately, because most of us we do a report every year called Oh Behave about how people feel about these things. And of course, most people don't think they're going to be the one who's going to fall for any of this stuff. They're not going to be the one who's going to click on the fish. They're not going to be the one who's going to fall for a romance scam or friendship scam. So saying to people, this could happen to you, doesn't really resonate because they don't think it can. So I think some of our future materials and campaigns are going to be more about like taking care of the people around you and looking out for the people in your life that might be going through a rough time or might be vulnerable in some way. And because we all like to help other people. We all like to think of ourselves as people who help other people. So maybe that's the emotional lever or the trigger that we use to try and keep more people from being victimized.
Yeah. And actually, when we talked with Aaron, that was something that I had asked about and we brought up too, is that, you who's listening to this podcast are probably more plugged into this than the next 5 nearest people to you. So it's your job as the person who knows this to be looking out for them. It's not necessarily about you always, but I wanted to ask about, because we spoke to Aaron West and the way she described the scale of these operations was like industrialized. And that is true, right? That it is a big operation with like plazas of people, like of buildings with people doing this.
Yeah, they basically look like a corporate campus or a college campus. It looks like a big row of dorms.
Wild.
Building upon building. I mean, you can Google it. There'll be photos. Aaron probably has some on a website somewhere as well.
Right.
The construction is happening really quickly. She's looked over the border at some of these places and has witnessed and has aerial photos to see how quickly they're growing. And the construction is just constant. And the cement trucks coming and going. And so yeah, it's not it's not slowing down, unfortunately.
So in the last 5-ish minutes that we have, I know you've got an effort to educate people about this. The NCA has been trying to bring information about this, these kind of scams and more to the public for quite a while. Tell us about the education campaign for romance scams. And then I want to ask you and have you kind of leave off with some of the video work that you've been doing.
So on staysafeonline.org on the homepage, you're going to find a big banner photo that leads you to the romance scam campaign. If you're working in training awareness, you're working in security, and you're trying to do a campaign for your organization, there's a campaign kit that you can download. And I love some of the graphics that we have in there because they look like, to me, they're reminiscent of the things you go buy at CVS for your kid to give away at school on Valentine's Day. So they're cute little graphics. I'll tell you a story about one a couple years ago. We did one that looked like the Chinese flag, except it was pink and red. And instead of stars, there were hearts. And it had a couple dancing around in the center of the graphic. And it read, "I love your face. Let me add it to my database." This was right when China was ramping up a lot of their facial recognition for controlling the public. And on LinkedIn, somebody shouted out the kit, and she happened to be in training and awareness at a company in Hong Kong.
Oh, wow.
And I said to the graphic artist, I think her name's on a list somewhere. And he said, "Lisa, your name is probably on a list somewhere." So it really made me realize just how far and wide our campaign materials go. And I was really, obviously I'm talking about it now. I still haven't forgotten about that. You'll see us in the press around this time of year because a lot of the media around Valentine's Day likes to pick up on that topic. last year on Valentine's evening, I was doing talk radio with the Boston radio station. Instead of going out to dinner with my husband, I'm going to try to do dinner this year.
Priorities.
Priorities, yes. Priorities.
Oh, no.
But lots of good materials you can use there. And as I said, we focus not just on romance scams, but also on the safe use of dating apps, because that's, that can be where things start. They're so critical these days to meeting people. I know so many people that are happily married because they met on a dating app. So we just want people to use those safely.
Fantastic. So then I think the last thing, NCA does such a good job providing resources to people that are in the awareness community, but then more broadly to anybody, really. Tell us a little bit about the Cubicle series, because this also touches on Mason's thought around, what's the scale of criminal enterprise? And I think you try to reflect that in that series pretty well. Yeah.
So you asked me about the video work. I forgot to mention that. So thanks very much for reminding me. So if you go to cubicleseries.com, it's cubicle spelled with K's, or you go to the Stay Safe Online YouTube channel, you will find a series that has now had 19 million views. It is basically like watching an episode of The Office, but it's the office of the bad guys. So the characters represent people from Russia, China, North Korea, and Iran.
Oh, fun.
The Iranian character cracks me up. He is dressed like he just came out of a disco in 1979. The actor did a really great job. But we have episodes on romance scams. We have episodes on sextortion, phishing, everything you can possibly imagine. And so we have just gotten funding, I'm very excited to announce, for a second season, because the first season, I think, was so successful. We won a CSO award for it. And of course, had 19 million people watch it. I think the thing that makes me the happiest is that people didn't just scroll through it like a TikTok video. Over 80% of people watched it on a large screen. So they either watched it on YouTube TV or they cast it to a larger device. So that, for me, is a really good indicator of engagement with the content.
Yeah.
And then we're working right now on fundraising, because every time I watch Dateline or 2020, I think to myself, where's my episode on cybercrime or scams that are cyber enabled? I'm kind of tired of watching married people kill their spouse instead of get a divorce.
Yeah, right.
It would be nice to see. And for the people that we work with in the Secret Service, we keep asking, why doesn't the public know that they investigate cybercrime and fraud? And the answer from them is always, well, the FBI gets all the TV shows. So we're looking at doing a documentary or a docudrama. And we have a producer who has had content on, I think, Showtime and other networks in the past, very successful. And he likes our mission and is willing to work with us in a way that's affordable for us, but we still have some fundraising to do. So we're really excited about that.
That's wicked cool.
Fantastic.
If we can do an episode or two and they're compelling and they get some good views, then maybe we'll get funding to do more.
The FAIK Files.